Okay, we will go ahead and get started. So I would like to introduce our two presenters. Zane Allyn is a Veeam Senior Systems Engineer, and Jonathan Harris is an HPE Storage Solutions Architect. So first off, I would like to thank both Jonathan and Zane for joining us today to present. As I mentioned, we will be having a Q&A portion of the event after Zane and Jonathan go through some information for you all. So please feel free to chat your questions as they're presenting, and then again, once we start the Q&A period. If you have any additional questions after the Q&A period that we're unable to get to, we'll make sure we follow up with you. And with that, I'll turn it over to Zane and Jonathan to get us started.
Right. Thank you. Glad to be here. And
hi, Zane.
Yeah. Hey, Jonathan. Thanks for joining me today as we talk to everyone.
And welcome everyone. As was mentioned today during our presentation, we're going to be talking about, Zane and I are kind of tag team, and we're going to explain how you can basically get a better proposition, a better value out of HPE and Veeam together. And talk a little bit about how we've grown together, how we integrate, and what that means for you, and what that means for the future for both of our companies and our solutions as well.
Yep. Absolutely.
So let's start diving into some stuff. We want to set the stage. Obviously, we're going to be talking about data protection, business continuity, these type of concepts, disaster recovery. There's a lot of different terms and a lot of different buzzwords that can be used for that. But that's where Veeam and HPE come together. And this particular landscape has changed a lot. Both Zane and I have been customers before, as well as been on the manufacturing side, and we both got a few years of experience doing this stuff. And, yeah, and we've seen a lot of change over the last few decades. Specifically in technology always changes fast, but it seems like it's accelerated a lot over the last few years, especially around the concept of data protection, business continuity, disaster recovery, and those type of concepts.
I think we talked about that before. I remember when recovering within a day or from a day ago was acceptable, but back when you might have been going straight to tape or something like that, or data wasn't as important. But that has definitely changed over the years, and those SLAs are don't ever go down. But if you do, let's lose as minimal as possible. And oh, and by the way, this environment's a lot more complex than it used to be. So.
Yeah,
that's the job that IT's tasked with nowadays, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And Zane, like you're saying, that a big part of that is that the data itself is more important. It's changed, and its role within each one of our organizations has changed a lot. And so I think that's one of the primary drivers, right? Is that the data itself is different than what it used to be. And the funny thing is that isn't stagnant at all. As I go out and I talk with customers in different organizations, the concept of collecting different kinds of data and using it for different things, that seems like that's top of mind for pretty much every organization that I've been talking to.
And some are even taking data and creating new data points from it, right? I mean, it's the business. It's definitely the business. And yeah. And IT staff said everything's inside the IT realm, right? So as an IT professional, those people are definitely tasked with keeping it available so that business can keep going and meeting those SLAs.
Yeah, and the SLAs, that's exactly right. The requirements around, so not only is the data changed in the applications there and it's growing so much, the requirements around protecting that and what we use it for is also changed. And I think that couples very, very closely into this third bar down on our slide, which is that the threat landscape has changed too. It used to be, we were really worried about some major hardware failure, somebody doing something dumb, accidentally deleting something. Those were our biggest threats. But that's not really where it lies anymore, is it?
No, it's at the edge. It's in your network. It's the threat is all over, from internal and external, and sometimes a little both. So it's absolutely true.
So what's interesting though is as we kind of dig into this a little bit more, there was a white paper that was put out by ESG here not very long ago that talked about specifically some of the benefits that happen with HPE's and Veeam's joint solutions. But they also did an analysis and did a survey of customers and kind of polled about, information about how important is data, where are you going, what are you doing with your data and whatnot. And in this white paper, they came out with some kind of cool statistics. They said that 20% of the respondents to their survey were saying that data was their business. I mean, their entire business was around managing, offering up, manipulating, creating data. 34% of the people that they surveyed said that their services were based upon the need, right, for data within
information.
That's right. It was information based, meaning they couldn't run their regular operations without data. And then we get into the next piece, which is more than half of them then said, well, even if they weren't centered around that today, over the next 2 years, they were going to be deploying systems, processes, procedures within their organization that were going to put them into those other two tiers, right? Where their whole job was data, or their processes and procedures were based upon that data.
And that's really interesting once that's like moving from this maybe manufacturing economy to selling data-centric products that are meeting those other needs, right? And that's the actual, not necessarily the business as much as the products, right? The product is, we offer data, collect data, use data to make other decisions or help other organizations make decisions. So again, as we go back to the other slide, just the data growth and that reliancy on it, which is the big part, is become paramount, right? That is business, and I'm sure they can measure it, and depending on the company, they could probably measure it in thousands, if not millions of dollars, as when they're down, right, and they're not able to offer those services or get access to that core business need.
Yeah, or even outside of the commercial sector, you get into the government and public sectors, and now it's a matter of having services available, right? Being able to actually run the things that taxpayers are paying for.
Yeah, it might be a mandate, right? Like we have to have this up. Yeah, we have that. Yeah, the SLA is now our taxpayers. Yeah, so it takes it to another level. That's a great point.
There was another piece in that survey that when they hit the customers that I thought was pretty interesting, and I brought out some more statistics here. And that was a kind of a comparison of what does the complexity of IT infrastructure look like. And by infrastructure, I don't just mean hardware, right? We're talking about connectivity, we're talking about nodes and hosts and servers, we're talking about software, middleware, front ends, all of that kind of stuff is part of the infrastructure anymore. And what we're seeing is through this digital transformation, right, as more and more things become digitalized in processes and procedures and in how companies are run, which we saw from the previous statistics, that 64% of people are saying that IT is more complex compared to the way it was just 2 years ago. And this is, again, they tied this back to, well, we're doing more, but in order to do more, we're having to create more complex systems in order to support.
Right. And some of those might even be doing more with less, right? And that might be less manpower to do these. So we got to do it smarter. So there's more complex systems that are automating things. Yeah, absolutely. Just kind of, it feeds each other, right?
That's right. And that does kind of develop a bit of a conundrum, doesn't it? Right? Is where we have to start doing more with less, and we have to do more with our data, but how are we going to get about doing that? And I think that there's some backup to this concept with the second statistic that's on this slide, and that's this idea that that overall spend, even during times of recession and when things have started to get pulled back during COVID especially, that the prediction of spend is either increasing or at least staying the same for the majority of organizations. And so, I mean, I think that kind of backs up the idea that the priority is there.
It's crucial. It's crucial to the business, so it has to be done. Yep. And everybody's trying to find smarter and smarter ways to do it, which is somewhat adding to the complexity, as we put here. But
yeah, and that's specifically around data protection. I find that as I've been talking with a lot of customers, a significant piece of that sits in the access security piece, meaning how do we keep from being infiltrated by malware or people that aren't supposed to be on our networks or accessing our systems, that sort of thing. And then the other half of the conversation is how do we mitigate and how do we make sure that our data is protected so that if there is some kind of breach, we can recover quickly. Ultimately our data has integrity and we can continue to have our systems run.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's kind of that defense in depth idea, right, that we've probably talked about, but really have to adhere to nowadays, right? It's keep it out, but when it happens, what am I going to do about it? There's not just one piece to this puzzle, and that's why data protection, I've always seen plays a large part in the compliancy, obviously, and security, for sure. But you got to find smart processes in this complex environment that are going to work, so that they're working, and you don't have to manage a lot, so that they will be there for you, and your plan will, come off without a hitch. So, not an easy task for sure, but
and I love that point because it's not easy. That additional complexity is really creating a bit of a problem, right? Because the traditional ways that we have protected our data don't really work anymore because our systems now are more accessible than they used to be, and they're growing than they used to be. I mean, even if you're just looking at unstructured data within people's environments, file shares and object shares and things of that nature, the total count of files and stuff has increased so much that they're pushing the capabilities of what our legacy data protection solutions have been able to do. And
missing windows, just exactly.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the idea of can I back up my 1 million files in the 1 hour backup window that I used to back up my 100,000 files in?
Right, but the same infrastructure. Yeah.
But that's right. It's right. I mean, I've upgraded my network, but still, I mean, how am I going to get to point B when what's in the middle keeps changing? And the other piece of that, going back to the original statistics, because data is so much more important, rather than the SLAs getting broader and opening themselves up so that we aren't threatened by complexity, they're actually tightening down. So the complexity is adding risk, and our need for data is adding risk at the same time.
Yeah, as the SLAs go to zero time, my complexities, exactly. That's a great point.
which can be a little bit scary, right? So I did think, though, that some of this information out of the ESG survey was interesting, right? Is that when in their survey, 50% of people said that no data loss, right? That's their SLA. 8%, 5%.
Big number too.
Yeah. I mean, I was actually kind of surprised. That used to be a very small echelon of our customers that we talked with. There was always seemed like there was some buffer. It's kind of interesting how we see this curve in those bars, because the people that are down in the minutes, I think they have slid down into the no data loss over the last few years.
Fair.
And then it's kind of slumped up into this 10 to 15 minute range. Now, for those of you that have been in IT for a while, that bump, that we see in that 23% bump, where was that, say, 5 years ago or 10 years ago? It wasn't at 10 to 15 minutes, was it? That was at 1 day or maybe an hour. If we go back 5 years, an hour is probably the common time. And then, but then, I mean, you go back 10 years, it was really a day, right? The SLA was that, every 24 hours is what we'd be able to protect. Anyway, so I thought that the statistics were interesting. So the real question.
I don't imagine just to end that. I'm sure that number's going to grow, right? Like I said, I was pretty surprised to see that number as high as it is, even though it's teens. It's still, it's over 10. I bet that, as you say, it'll slide more and more and more as that complexity grows. 100%.
Yeah, there's just an expectation there, isn't it? From all the end users, the expectations that systems will be there and that the data that they've created and they've been using will be there as well.
Well, and you access things. I think that's another big part. You access things from everywhere, right? I got laptops, mobile phones, intern the network. Heck, most of us probably even on this roundtable here aren't in our office, or maybe don't visit often if we've been there in the last year. So you can get up in the middle of the night and start working. So that expectation of I should be able to push the button and it's there, and I don't want to know why it's not there or think about the back end. So that's kind of why I think why I would guess you see that number of no data loss growing.
So I pulled out a couple more statistics here, and around this idea that cloud, and this kind of drives into this new trends that we're seeing here, right? Secondary sites, backup data centers, DR, for business continuity. 42% were using on-site centric approach, which that fits, but compared to 5 years ago, that number's dropped, right, significantly. 79%, I thought that was interesting. 79% are using third-party solutions, meaning what are they doing? They're starting to outsource the protection of their data. It's become that complexity, and that those tight SLAs are starting to drive the capabilities of IT departments to manage that entire solution themselves. And I'm seeing that pretty much across the board. And then more than 50% of people are gone to cloud-based solutions. And I think there's multiple reasons for that.
I'm sure cost is a big driver, for sure, right? I to maintain and keep up a site for my DR that I need just in case might not make sense for budgetary. So mitigating that to a third party or even cloud-based solutions. Plus, as we'll talk about, I think through the presentation, cloud-based solutions are just kind of becoming part of that hybrid data center as well, right? These would be some of the, so I'm already living there, might as well utilize it for production dev, maybe it's dev and DR, right? And starting to explore these other use cases for their cloud-based solutions. Yeah, at least that's what I see when I talk to customers.
Yeah, well, and it's introducing a different way to consume it too, right? Yeah. Rather than the standard way of, every 3 to 5 years you're doing some type of refresh, or you're growing your infrastructure and you're putting an asset on that then goes on the books and then it has to be depreciated over time, and that process, which has really been the way IT has been run for so long, even in the licensing space, that's really shifting quite a bit. And even for companies that don't necessarily want to do everything OpEx, still subscription-based services tend to be more predictable, and they tend to be easier to manage than the way that we've done it in the past. And I think that's quite big.
And you could probably be project-based with that, right? Like you said, it's not a large capital outlay, so I can do it as needed, and then kind of predictive cost if I need to add on to that or use it for a separate project. So absolutely, I think that's a big driver. And you can pivot too, right? I mean, that's the core base of Veeam solution is the fact that you can take your data and kind of restore it anywhere. So we understand that need to pivot at some point or change direction or move cloud to cloud. So just a lot of flexibility, right? Flexibility in cost, spend, as well as tools, right, of deployment.
Yeah, and I think that's perfect, Zane, because I remember when I was working in IT and cloud was just becoming all the new rage, and everybody said you're going to save a whole bunch of money by moving infrastructure into the cloud. You go platform as a service or even SaaS, and you're going to save money. And it didn't really pan out that way. For some applications, it did, but generally speaking, it's not cheaper. But the flexibility that you're talking about is absolutely there, and I think that becomes the driver, right? You pay a premium price so that you can pay for what you use, and you can get what you need very quickly. And
scale up, scale down, absolutely.
Exactly. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a hyperscaler type of cloud. This is really any kind of cloud or service provider or as a service type of solution offers that type of flexibility. Because what are you really doing? You're outsourcing the infrastructure to somebody else, and you are becoming the consumer then of that service.
Yeah. And you're right. I mean, data center is data center, right? Public cloud, still data center. If you're doing that somehow internally as a service, it's still running data center. It's just that consumption model is the key piece there. We're paying for it this way. We're consuming it as we need it, and not large capital outlays like in the traditional.
Yes.
I used to have to have a 10 to 15% ROI to get any project done when I worked for a large newspaper company, because that's exactly how they did it. We're going to lay out this money. We can raise capital this way. It has to make more than 10% ROI somehow, and then you pretty much get it approved unless we had to do it. So this model changes that entirely.
Yeah, and because that type of model is changing, and because that's the way people are going, which we've seen from the statistics in the ESG survey, really the way that we've always done it it doesn't really work when it comes to data protection, to backup, and business continuity. It's really the solutions that we're trying to protect, the amount of data we're trying to protect has become too large and too complex to keep doing it the way we've always done it. So there needs to be new ways to do that particular piece, which, you know, that may be different processes and procedures. It may mean different products. It certainly means new features and capabilities within the products that we utilize. And I think that's really where we start bringing into what Veeam and HPE are offering, right? We've kind of set the table and said what's going on, and I'm sure that's all nice and grand and probably nothing new to anybody on this call. But the question is, so what are we going to do about that?
Right.
And,
right. Yeah.
and that's really what we're heading to, right? Is this idea that we can bring about and we can develop solutions to attack the particular problems and pitfalls of protecting data today.
Yeah. So we started with the Veeam Cloud Data Management Platform. Kind of a big term, right? There's a lot of, can be several pieces in here, but it's really about having that complete stack to meet the needs that we're talking about before. So backup and recovery obviously is paramount, and really, you know, where this company started, obviously backup recovery. I like to say even, you know, DR planning or business continuity, right? As we go up the stack, the cloud mobility I mentioned, this hybrid data center is growing out, and I think, and hopefully we'll see this at the end of the preso, everybody. Well, Veeam and HPE developing together really want to build a platform, a core product that as you grow, we have places or pieces in place to grow as well. So you don't have to pivot and change, right? You might go as a consumption-based model, but kind of the tech that you're using is going to grow with your business as well. And a big part of that we've done is the cloud mobility. And I sort of mentioned it before, the ability to reach out and grab, well, heck, even just take data from on-prem and restore it into the cloud. Maybe you want to start in dev up there, able to take your data and shift it up. But at the same time, have the ability to capture that data, protect it, and then shift it somewhere else or bring it back, right? As we said, as you mentioned, as I've had the conversation more than once with customers, it wasn't cheaper to go to the cloud. In fact, maybe the way we went to the cloud was not the right way to approach that cloud. We need to reset, or we need to change things that we're doing, or I need to bring things back on-prem that make more sense there. So having the ability to not be locked in as your data center grows, you know, grow with you. Same for both of our companies. And then monitoring analytics, right? What are you going to do while that's running? How do I know it's healthy? How do I know I'm on top of it? How do I know my DR is working for me? And maybe that goes actually to the bottom, governance and compliance, right? How can I show that to auditing, right? I was under Sarbanes at one point, and I would have loved to have the myriad of reports that I could have had with Veeam. This was quite some time ago, so I did not have that ability. But the ability to show, and then even for yourself, right? To my point earlier, you want to put a system in that's easy to manage, so you're not managing it, right? It don't need to be a full-time data protection management, but I know it's working. I have reports, or I have monitoring that lets me know it's working and lets me know when it is kind of deviating, and I can jump on it. And then you couple all that with the ability to automate, right? We kind of made that point earlier too. As things are getting more complex, I need systems that work, that have in place less management, but also to help me orchestrate, right? So I can pre-plan what my DR looks like. I can pre-plan what my restores look like. It's predictive. I can test it, and then I can orchestrate it or automate it at the time that I need it. You know, just building that logic. So it's take a lot of the manual processing out, where the, and maybe I'm speaking for me, but where I would, you know, the human mistakes, right? Every time I had to touch something, there was that chance for an error or me to skip something. So, you know, building a rock solid plan with orchestration and automation to ensure that doesn't happen. And that's really what I believe, and we should prove in this presentation that Veeam has done on top of HPE, and likewise as we've co-developed over the many years that we've been partners, or alliance partners, I should say.
You know, Zane, as you're talking through the different pieces there, something that stands out to me is there's nothing in there about backup or DR, right? The title itself, the concept that this is a cloud data management platform, is this idea that we've kind of graduated past a point solution for making a copy of my data and putting it over here. And I'm going to keep this many copies. It's now
leave it there if I need it.
That's right. And it's a more holistic approach to how do I make sure that my data is managed? Do I know where it's at? Can I put it where it needs to be? And do I have the right amount of copies to make sure that I'm compliant, to make sure I'm, staying away from risk, that my systems and my processes and my organization can stay up and running. So
Yep.
we're not really talking about backup anymore, are we? We're really talking about data management.
Yeah. Data is important, data management. Maybe use that, you can use that data for other uses, right? There's many use cases in Veeam that's not even, I'm using it to set up other systems or copy over here for another use. That has nothing to do with recovery, right? It's just manage my data, understanding where it is, moving it to where I need to so that I can use it in my business effectively, be that from DR or just the business as a whole. So that's a great point.
It made me think of this next slide, so I'm going to go ahead and slide over, right? And you're talking about this idea of having data where it's best to have it. And I know Veeam has some pretty amazing features for being able to take care of, data where it needs to be. Do you want to tell us a little more about the data piece here?
Sure. So that extends out, right? We talk about cloud mobility, but also what do I do about this data that I've moved off or I've mitigated? I think, first one, Office 365, by hand, I don't know the statistics, but it's got to be the most widely adopted SaaS platform there is. I don't think I talked to a customer that isn't thinking about going or is already there, right? It's almost strange to have maybe I haven't talked to everybody, but it's a lot less common to have an Exchange on-prem, right? It still exists. I still deal with it. We still cover it. But I was an IT professional all the way to management, and as soon as we could do that, we were moving towards that because, I don't know, I had to be an Exchange admin mostly in my life, several times, but it wasn't something I was focused on, right? So to kind of mitigate that off. So the ability to see that data and protect it the same way you did if it were on-prem, is what Veeam has built in, and it's been a great product of ours. We've had it for many years, version 5 now, almost 6. So it's growing. It's a great product. Actually, it grows just as fast as the cloud part of it because Microsoft Office 365 seems to be a moving target. But it supports everything from email to, now, which was the largest adopter, to OneDrive, giving everybody free space. And I'm seeing a lot of that home drive shift up there. So that protection, and it's funny, the conversations I've had in the past, well, we probably won't protect that. That's just free space too. Yeah, we need to protect it, because people are using it. You got directors using it. You got whatever, department heads using it. Someone's going to say, hey, you got that backed up, right? It's in the cloud. Everything's safe. Teams channel, the adoption over the last year, we support that now from Restore. I know you as a company have leveraged Teams. We leverage Teams a lot. I'm having many conversations that there's actually sharing of data there. It's important to cover that. And just because you moved to the cloud, right, I mitigated the fact I don't have to be an Exchange admin anymore, doesn't mean that isn't your data. That isn't your responsibility, right? Microsoft's SLA is to keep that thing up and running, keep it available. It isn't necessarily to protect you from accidental deletions, insider threat, just aged off data that got deleted that no one thought of until, 6 months down the line and need it back. So it's just because you put it out there doesn't mean it isn't your responsibility. And that's the same with virtual machines they're running out there. So cover of Azure, AWS, and even Google now. That's still your data. You shifted it. I think we just made that point. A data center is a data center, right? You're not doing the infrastructure anymore with IaaS, but that's still your data. In fact, those machines are your responsibility. So if you want to capture those, you want to keep that data's changing on there, you need to make sure that it's you're under compliancy there and you're capturing it. And then moving as this hybrid center is growing out and cloud native is really becoming a thing. And it's actually more than just Azure Kubernetes. We have moved into the Kubernetes space, right? So I know this isn't for everybody, but Kubernetes, it's like 7 years young, they say, right? 6-7 years. We're seeing a large adoption, and that just takes the complexity to the next level. It's infrastructure as a code, if you will, and it's ran by application owners or DevOps people. It's really abstracted from the traditional infrastructure, right? It's this other layer, this other thing. But it probably drives that part of the business. It's probably just as crucial. It might be, like we said, those businesses that are offering data-based products, that might be how it's ran, right? So those are just as crucial. And as we'll talk in subsequent slides here, it isn't as ephemeral as you think, right? It's things that need to get spun up and they can scale out as they need, but there's still unique data in there that's unique to your business, unique to your needs, to your process, whatever it is, that you want to be able to get back quickly, right? Or even have DR for. So cloud data management, that's been snapped on the Veeam. This is our largest growth here. We're still dedicated to the core product, but as the hybrid data center grows, so does Veeam for your data protection and cloud data management needs, right?
I think one of the key pieces, right, was the acquisition of Kasten here not too long ago.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So that's our Kubernetes piece. So Kasten, it truly, I'm fortunate to be on some teams internally where we bought the company and we're kind of merging the two and learning the product internally from those professionals. And it truly is, in my mind, what Veeam was originally, right? Veeam said, hey, traditional backups don't work for VMs, right? VMware is a different thing, right? Traditionally, VMware, where we started, you can't just do what you did for a physical machine, right? It's just, there's all sorts of side effects, all sorts of things you got to consider. There's a better way. And that's what Veeam set out to do, and I think we did. Veeam pioneered that, and now it's a huge. There's many companies that attack it. Kasten is truly that as well. It's Kubernetes native backup that runs in the Kubernetes. It understands that complicated, that complexity of that environment, and then gives you the ability to restore things quickly and just attributes, just pieces, right? So, not to mention, I think I mentioned on the other one, we support Google, GKS, EKS, AKS. We support all the Kubernetes across the cloud, as well as, we'll talk about on-prem, like HPE storage, just Kubernetes in general. So as these microservices are built out, they're spread across all these information. So it isn't even just one environment, right? So being on the outside is not the approach that Kasten took. So it's Kubernetes native, offers you backup and recovery, application mobility, just like with the cloud. You can take that to another cloud, to another Kubernetes environment. It does have multi-tenancy, because another big part of it is these application, as I mentioned, owners or these DevOps, they're really in charge of that whole environment. It's infrastructure as a code, and they're just kind of served up storage and infrastructure. Things are done right. They don't really have to be involved with provisioning. So to give them also that multi-tenancy to be able to pick what's backed up, when it's backed up, and how to restore it and where to restore it is a real big part of what Kasten provides, and very important. And then, you still need disaster recovery, because again, that's running somewhere. Outages happen. Cloud is still physical data centers. My on-prem is physical data centers. No matter how I'm consuming it, I still have to plan for, hey, these things need to have uptime. So I need to have a plan, a backup plan, a way to flip this over quickly. So, yeah.
I think it's interesting. I'm going to just build out this next slide. You can maybe talk a little more about the approach if you want to, but something that stands out to me when I think about the utilization of containers, right, and this idea of infrastructure as a code and the complexity that brings, but also the flexibility and the simplicity on the other end, right, that it brings, which is the reason why we do it, is it doesn't get rid of the underlying infrastructure. So it's like you're running infrastructure as a code, but what are you running it on top of?
Yeah.
You're running it on top of traditional infrastructures, or virtualized infrastructures, or cloud infrastructures, depending on how you consume those. So,
or both, or all of them. You might be across all that too, right? That's the other part, right?
That's exactly right. And that goes back to that concept of, is IT more complex than it used to be? Yeah, because you're layering all these things, but now you got to protect all the layers. Because if you just protect your containers environment and you don't protect the VMs that are under your containers environment, right? Now you're at risk.
Grabbing all the data, or the data that it's attached to, the database that's running, that the containers are running off. Because I think that's kind of been a conception. You're like, well, containers just spin up and down. I got my scripts. Well, yeah, but there's still these like objects that they have, right? There's secrets, there's config files, there's actual persistent data, right? That's why you have persistent volume claims for that application. At some point, that application is spread across many different pieces, including actual infrastructure, as you mentioned. So the ability to, you need to grab all that. You need something that understands where all that data is and what you should be capturing and what is important, so that you can quickly pull it back and don't have to rebuild it from scratch. But yeah, to your point, I mean, it is still infrastructure, even though it's infrastructure as a code, and the team that's really deploying it is deploying it on top of traditional infrastructure. Those aren't even the same teams, probably. most likely, right? You have these IT DevOps, cloud ops IT. They have full management and ownership of this, but at the bottom line, something still has to serve it up, and you need to have that in tune, right, and perfect, and be able to go off without a hitch, and so the two teams don't have to help each other when they're provisioning, which is what this world really provides. So, yeah, and that's what this provides here. Stateful sets versus non is, yeah, these, like I said, these objects are there. It's all abstract underlying infrastructure. I mean, the networking is in pods, the data is in one other pod, it's spread across. It could be, as we mentioned, in a cloud and on-prem. So Kasten's approach, being that complete application, is what makes it exciting and a great product to use, because again, it goes in, it's actually, if you're familiar with Kubernetes, it actually puts it in its own namespace. It is Kubernetes, it runs on Kubernetes, so it understands the application. It's not looking on the outside in, so it becomes part of that. And then it gives the app dev team the ability to use tools that they remember, that they're familiar with, right? I mean, if you go into the Kasten console, you can download all the YAML files, for instance, these things that they're very familiar with that show them exactly what it's doing, but it's automating it for them. It's giving them a fresh GUI that they can do multi-tenancy with. They can, perform their own operations, perform their own restores. So it's really a whole new approach. As I mentioned, Veeam did for VMware, Kasten did for Kubernetes, right? Hey, we're not doing traditional inside. We're going to be inside Kubernetes and back it up the way this solution is meant to be utilized.
Well, and now we could say Veeam is now doing that for Kubernetes, because Kasten is
Kasten by Veeam.
That's right.
Kasten by Veeam. Yep.
I'll build this one out. Do you want to talk a little more about architecture on this, or?
Yeah, so I think we kind of alluded to this. It's still physical infrastructure, and that's where the nice tie-in with HPE, and I think you'll talk about Esmeralda, but it's the CSI drivers, those storage drivers that allow K10's the Kasten platform, but the container orchestration platform, the K8, if it is, be able to provision and utilize storage off of HPE storage. So as infrastructure can build out capacity, the K8, the Kubernetes environment can just consume that as it needs it. And the beautiful thing about Kubernetes is pods can be destroyed and spin up over here and spin up over here, and it's really it doesn't matter where it is in that physical environment, right? That's what these what they call CSIs do for the Kubernetes environment. So as I've kind of alluded to, K10, which is it's what we call Kasten, it's like K8, is built on top of that orchestration platform. So it's in there. It's part of that environment as well. Again, it installs itself just like you would any containerized application. It is a containerized application. And then it reaches out, figures out all those pieces all the way down to that storage piece, that persistent volume, and lets you see what a complete application is. We call it compliant, right? So I need to protect this application, says these are all the pieces, and I'm able to grab them, and I'm compliant. On top of that, it supports something, we're calling it application blueprint here. It's called basically a sidecar or something to that effect. There's data that sits outside that, maybe application-centric, MySQL, a database of some sorts. There's ways for it to then have connectors, which you download from Kasten or from other places, and then it's able to then also reach out and grab that data. So not only are you getting the complete Kubernetes application, but anything that it is attached to, where the data lives, where the data is being stored and being retrieved from, is also being pulled into this. So it's truly a complete application-centric approach, because it's, again, right there in the Kubernetes platform, talking directly down to the storage layer, all the way out to the application,
so
capturing all those files.
Zane, one of the most common use cases for containers that I've seen with a lot of my customers has been in trying to deploy and utilize artificial intelligence and machine learning. And generally speaking, the data sets or the data lakes that those platforms or those applications access are not running in the containers themselves, right? So it sounds like what you're saying, though, is that Kasten basically looks at what the application is doing holistically and can pull all of the data set together and protect it together so that if you do need to restore it or move it, shift it someplace else using Veeam Kasten, then you have everything there together. So it's really simplified that whole process so that even if you are not the expert of all things infrastructure and where the data is and how do I access it, because it's running within the environment, it can take care of that for you. It can automate that whole process.
It'll identify that all for you, use these blueprints to go out and grab that data. And then, even if you just wanted to move part of the infrastructure, because it shows all those objects, you can just restore an application without the secrets because you got a new one, just the secrets. You can find config files. So it truly understands the whole app and simplifies it. So you don't have to be I got to know all the way down to the app, the storage layer. I just am the app owner. I know how to dev this app. This is all the pieces. I have it. I can move it here. I can do DR with it there. I can just restore the piece I need. Or I can use it for a whole other environment and spin off of it. Again, data management, right? Just in that native Kubernetes form. So,
I love that.
Excited.
Yeah, I know oftentimes I've talked with customers and they'd like to do more with their data, right? Remember we saw the statistics of how many people thought they were going to be doing more data over the next few years. But it can be intimidating because it's like, well, what if I don't know how? I'm going to have to learn all these new infrastructures or new tools. And the beauty of this, by putting intelligent tools like Kasten in play, then it actually mitigates some of that. It makes that ramp up much easier. And like Zane was talking about, I mean, obviously this works and has some great plugins to HPE infrastructure that is going to be running underneath your containers environment, your Kubernetes environment. And we can see that here in this diagram. To kind of dig into this a little bit more, HPE actually has its own containers platform, and it's based on open source Kubernetes. This is not a proprietary thing, but is an open source platform. But what HPE has done, much like Kasten did for protecting these environments, they've developed an entire stack that can be installed all together that gives access to app stores and tools that are native for containers. So if you want to start doing AI and machine learning, but you don't have the expertise of all those things, but of building the infrastructure to do that, but you are a data scientist, you can deploy HPE Ezmeral, a containers platform, and it will come with all of those capabilities, all of those plugins. And in a lot of ways, it's like going to an app store, and you can kind of see this at the top, right? At the very top, you've got all these personas of people that utilize containers, your engineers, your data scientists, your app developers, your DevOps groups. And then just below that, you've got all these apps. That's really where it's at, right? What am I going to do with the containers underlying? And it's been difficult. The ramp up of moving to containers has been difficult because all of these things, all these different layers have been separated. And so the DevOps guy didn't have the expertise to do the stuff down low. And the engineers that know how to do the stuff down low in the stack don't know how to do the stuff up high. And so by offering this all together, HPE Ezmeral offers basically the entire infrastructure as well as the plugins, the reach outs, and the what do we call it now? The app store, if you will, to go and access use cases for
the charts. I think is what they call them. Yep.
And so that's enterprise. It's everything from access, integration, security, application, load balancing, obviously the Kubernetes piece, which is the orchestration of all of the containers themselves. You've got the control plane, right, for access and management. And then you've got underneath that, what do you have? You got data fabrics underneath, virtualized infrastructure, maybe physical infrastructures. And that includes the software or the drivers, if you will, that will then reach out to the underlying infrastructure, specifically storage, right? How do I take a block storage or a file or an object storage platform and offer that up to be consumed? That's all built into the solution to automate that process and make it as simple as possible so that you can adopt these new technologies. And so that's what the HPE Ezmeral container platform is. And obviously, Kasten is a perfect marrying spouse to this, because once you start running this stuff, you need to be able to protect it and manage where your data is going to be.
Yep. As you adopt it more and more, you got to protect it, and you can shift, from protecting your traditional workloads to the workloads over here, or do both. Absolutely.
I think we've already talked a lot about this idea of how important data is, right? Obviously, data is the lifeblood of our organizations anymore. Is the more we digitize, the less and less of the file cabinets we have out in the office, and more that data is being pulled in, and we're trying to do more than with that data than that's there, all that digitalization. So rather than, I guess, rehashing that, which we kind of talked about with the ESG stuff, let's kind of go into this particular piece, right? And that's with the new version of Veeam that's come out, we're I guess, really jumping into that concept, right? We're moving forward with what the marketplace needs as well with it. Version 11 that just came out. When was that released, Zane?
February. I think it's been out since February. So, yeah, great new features. If you've been with Veeam for a while, you've probably heard the first one, the continuous data protection, the ability to get to that zero, right? That zero data loss that so many people are trying to go for between your VMware environments, and get that second interval, that log redo. And then back to the security. This one I'm pretty excited about. I've been written on this. The hardened Linux repository, the ability to set files truly immutable, and then basically give Veeam least access to that Linux repository, so that even an insider threat, someone with access to the admin console, somebody gets credentials, cannot get to that and change that data sitting on that Linux repository. And it's just a Linux repository. It goes very well on HPE servers, Apollo. There's definitely some use cases out there. So this is just a more hardened approach to what we traditionally had as a Linux repo. And you can use, the flavor of Linux that you're most suitable with, most familiar with. Talk about data being important and people taking it long term. We have added another tier to our cloud tiering. So Veeam has had cloud tiering for some time, well, for a few versions, going all the way back to 9.5, update 4 actually. But now that ability to take that long-term data and take it off to even colder, cheaper, right, storage, right? Kind of in the write once, read never thought process, right? Because I need this data, I want to keep it. It might be costly to bring it out, but I don't want to store something for multiple years that I'm not going to access very infrequently, if ever. And then expanded instant recovery. These are some exciting ones. This not only improved the engine for VM recovery, but we can recover, as we talk about cloud mobility, any data anywhere, right? I can take things from AWS down to VMware. I can take it to Hyper-V. It's pretty mobile across everything we support, but it also includes databases now. So I can take SQL databases, Oracle, and bring them online right from the backup, turn them on, get them back to work, and then restore them while they're running. So it's that instant recovery, VM recovery, but for databases. So that's what's important to me. I have a SQL server. I just need this thing that's feeding my applications to be back online. Well, great. You can do that with our backup engine. And then the next one, I think, goes into what we're kind of talking about here on the GreenLake side, but the ability to do that as a service, right, or somewhat as a service, consume it in a different model. So I think that.
Yeah, so I think that's where HPE comes in, right? Is that in order to consume Veeam as a service, you still have to have hardware. Veeam is software, and without hardware to run it on, you can't really consume it. And so HPE and Veeam have basically partnered together, and we've created an as-a-service model so that you can do, backup as a service or DR as a service running on HPE hardware, pay for what you utilize. And this runs under our as-a-service model, which is also referred to as GreenLake. That's the product name for our as-a-service model. And we have that for backup with Veeam, as well as lots of other products. In fact, the goal for HPE is by the end of this year, by the time we get into 2022, that we'll be offering basically every infrastructure that HPE offers as a service. And this is all going to be under the term GreenLake is the product name for that. And that's really what we're talking. So if you hear GreenLake, what does it mean? It means HPE as a service.
Everything we're talking about is a service. Yeah,
that's right. And because HPE and Veeam, we partner together, you can actually purchase all your Veeam licensing through HPE with the hardware that you need to run the infrastructure. So again, it all gets bundled, and then we can offer it as a service. So what does that really mean, though? There's different pieces of HPE products then that come into that concept, and these can be consumed as a service or not. But these are where the integration pieces come in the HPE product line. And the integration that we have in all these HPE products has continued to expand with Veeam 11 that's come out with features and deeper integrations. Store Once is our capacity optimized backup solution or secondary storage solution. What is it really? It's a storage appliance with all the great voodoo around data reduction and shrinking your data. Integrates very well with Veeam, utilizing what we call our Catalyst repository or Catalyst API, and so that you can do backups utilizing Veeam and really mitigate the amount of storage you need on the back end in order to archive or store that long term. But mitigates the use for older technologies like tape, right? If you want to keep everything on.
Yep, and then we can replicate that from Store Once to Store Once, so you can go off-site. So that's one of the newer integration pieces in Veeam 11. It's just, well, how we do that, right? Let the HPE Store Once do a really good job of dedupe and then let it be managed, but Veeam never loses sight of it, so you can still leverage Veeam for the recovery.
Yeah, because if we go back to that cloud management platform around Veeam, which really, Zane, as you were explaining it, it was all about visibility and knowing where your data is, right? And so
Absolutely.
You want to keep that. So even though you may be running on different types of hardware architectures and platforms, Veeam is still going to be your single pane of glass for management and visibility. And so that's where that integration really comes into place. So yeah, what's that?
And true with the primaries, right? We can see the snapshots on the front end for restore. We can see the backups that are copied off and kept long term, and yeah, that complete visibility in that single pane there to manage it, even all the way up to what you're sending off site, right, to the HPE cloud volumes.
Well, yeah, I mean, just like you're saying there, in the light blue square, we've got our HPE Primera, Nimble Storage. These are our primary block storage solutions, and Veeam has amazing integration, right? As a customer, actually, I used to run Nimble Storage, and we utilized Veeam specifically because we could have Veeam as a single pane of glass and control all of our production storage snapshots and then replicate them off-site without having to go into different panes of glass in order to do that. And so for our primary storage products, our Tier 0 and our Tier 1 products, you've got that integration with Veeam for Tier 0 data protection. But on the other piece of that, which is the square next to it, Nimble Storage also makes a wonderful secondary repository. If you want to use the advanced features that Veeam has around sandboxing, instant VM recovery, and those sort of things, building up labs, mining your data, test dev environments out of backup data, really getting your backups to work for you, you need to run that on something that not only has good data reduction so that you aren't like blowing up capacity-wise, but also have a good I/O profile. And Nimble Storage is a fantastic option to be able to do that. Many customers utilizing it for that. Likewise, though, if you didn't want to go with a shared storage solution, the HPE Apollo 4000 platform is our density optimized server, where basically you can get, well, in the 4510s, you can get up to 60 drives in one chassis. And you get with an 18 terabyte drive in there, that is a ton of density when it comes to storage. If you need something more performant, you go with the 4200s, where you're getting up to 48 drives in one chassis. And so because it's a server, right, there's a lot of versatility. You can build in the performance you need as a media server. You can run your Veeam media servers right there on it, and it acts as your repository as well. Very, very popular for your primary or your first tier backup repository are the HPE Apollo servers. And then the last box on there, the other part of our portfolio, is our cloud product. HPE Cloud Volumes is a cloud offering of storage. And there is a part of that offering, part of it is block storage, the other part of it is backup, where we're offering that Catalyst store that we have on the Store Once is being offered out of the cloud. So you've got native backup right out of Veeam to be able to back up directly to the cloud. And one of the beauties of being able to use that is, unlike some of the other hyperscalers, there's no ingress and egress fees. You pay for what you utilize. So after data reduction, that's what you pay for. And your access to that is going to be based upon your internet connection. So your speed for restores and backups, you can invest in that, and you're not going to pay for every gig that you're shoving in and out, every get and put, right? You're not going to be paying for all that stuff when you're using Cloud Volumes. Works great as an archive tier. You could back up directly to there, but the most common deployment model we've seen is really around having an Apollo or a Nimble or a Store Once on-prem, and then doing your backup
And shipping it.
Yeah, shipping it off. That's exactly right.
Yeah, so you have a lot of options here, but you can leverage the whole HPE stack to get you whatever that need is for your SLA and for your team.
Lots of flexibility.
And this one we can quickly do, the one license for any workload. All the things we talk about, we have this thing called Veeam Universal Licensing. It lets you license different workloads with one license. So I like to kid it's a Chuck E. Cheese token, if that lands with anybody. I can use it for this. I can then move it and use it for another workload because, I moved that data, or I no longer need to protect something in this environment. I need to protect it over there. So just portable licensing.
So yeah, why don't we hop through some of the other features that are new?
Yeah, these are the storage integrations, just showing you the changes, right? That Catalyst backup copy we talked about, backup to tape, just more flexibility, more visibility into what Store Once is keeping that visibility in Veeam. I think that's kind of what you see from all these.
Yeah, additional expansion.
Backup.
Yep.
Yeah, we're able to support that, so you can use the dedo for this. Storage snapshots, an interesting one from an agent for anything that's maybe a physical volume off of a Nimble Primera. We can back it up through our proxy. So storage snapshot backup for things that aren't VMs.
Yeah, synchronous snapshot replication or peer persistence is what is called in the HPE ecosystem. That's also something new that's been added to our Primera platform. So if you're running high availability storage, especially in virtual infrastructure, now Veeam can fully integrate into those as well, which is pretty sweet. Just kind of rolling into this, the partnership that HPE and Veeam have runs really deep. We've really been partnering for more than a decade now, and the key piece, as you've seen, is it's all about flexibility, right? The partnership is integrating into multiple different products so that we can build the solution that is going to be right for what your particular use case is and what your environment is.
That's true, right? It's a solution. I like that word, and I think if anybody take away from anything from this, it's a solution, right? We're talking about a whole piece solution, and then even the way that you consume it, as you've mentioned with GreenLake. So, yeah, and then the R&D and the development between the two companies just continues behind the scenes to make that solution grow as your data center grows, and you're not relying on two different companies. It's almost like one. It's the way I'd like to think of it. Yeah, maybe I'm going out of lines there, but
no, I think that's exactly right. And like I said, we bundle all of this together, and I'll talk a little bit more here in just a minute about how GreenLake works. But our as a service model, really, it's you consume Veeam and HPE hardware as a service 100%, meaning you don't even have to own any of that stuff, and you can scale it the same way you would in like a hyperscaler type of cloud. And we'll talk more about that here in a minute. We've already talked a bunch about these sort of things, kind of the problems and stuff we've run into as we've talked about the ESG survey. I did want to kind of bring out what are some typical solutions that we see, and where are the points? How does this map out? Because I know that we're kind of running low on time here at this point too, but very typical deployments, right, is using the single pane of glass of Veeam to be able to manage your primary storage, right? And that could be multiple systems that are synchronously replicating each other, managing the snapshots, the retention of those snapshots, the replication of those snapshots. That's your tier 0 data protection, right? There's no reason to go without that, especially on an HPE platform where it's very, very efficient. You're not wasting a lot of resources in order to do that. But then comes the next piece. We keep that single pane of glass as we start then managing the data out to different repositories and different tiers, whether that's HPE Nimble Storage, Apollo servers, Store Once, or out to Cloud Volumes. And that's where our tier 1 and our tier 2 repositories come into play.
And you can classify data to do different things across this whole, but you have the footprint, the solution in place to then leverage for whatever your needs are. Yep.
Absolutely. Yep, absolutely. We already talked a little bit about how that Cloud Volumes piece works. Again, you pay for what you use, after data reduction, right, which is very, very nice from a backup standpoint because you want to be able to have an archive type of solution. Basically you've got your storage. Veeam will then do the backup. It'll go into a repository, and then you'll do your copy jobs, or you will shift off into the cloud is the way that works. The idea is you pay as you go. You eliminate complexity by doing this. There's not very many hops because it's integrated with the HPE ecosystem, and it allows you then to leverage cloud, the flexibility. Even though it's not always cheaper, sometimes you just need the flexibility of being able to have long-term in the cloud to reduce your footprint on-prem, especially reduce your technical debt, those sort of things. I love this slide. This is everything. Yeah, this is everything. So the question is, what can we really do with HPE and Veeam together? The answer is everything. So all of the stuff we've talked about, whether you're running these new technologies in the cloud as a service, like Office 365, VMs in Azure, you're running Kubernetes in the cloud and on-prem, standard virtual workloads, physical legacy workloads, whatever those happen to be, there is a solution here together that you can have infrastructure that will then offer up and support Veeam to be able to manage where your data is and how it's going to be protected. So here's Veeam in the middle, right? And you can manage your snapshotting here. You can do VM-based replication. So let's say that you're not running HPE infrastructure in your other data center, but you still want to do your replication. You certainly absolutely can with Veeam. There's integration with hyperconverged solutions like our SimpliVity solution. Now, SimpliVity actually has built-in backup, but you can augment that with Veeam, right? Getting to that full 3-2-1, right? You always want to have 3 copies of your data, 2 different types of media, and a copy offsite. And so Veeam is what allows that to do that, even for solutions like our HPE SimpliVity that have backup built in. Anything else you want to bring out here, Zane?
I think a question, I mean, we were going to do questions later, but as we run low, came through, because we keep talking about the snapshot integration, which I agree is a crucial part of it, right? I can do the RPOs there, still have my data offsite, or data into another tier, into my data offsite, giving you that 3-2-1 with one even being immutable or only read only. But someone brought up about licensing, that talk about our integration together, but that's a plus feature with Veeam to get that integration. That is true. Plus was the way you had to get all the features of storage integration. But now, in that Vault licensing I talked about, our new licensing, we're just giving you everything included. So that's actually not even a factor anymore. So you buy Veeam licensing, especially on as a service, as we talked about here, you're just going to get all the features. So you actually don't even have to worry about that anymore. So it has changed, just to answer that question. Just saw that come through. Thought I'd address it here. Maybe that made sense.
Yeah, I love that too, because one of the things that's cool is even though the IT is getting more complex over time, what Veeam and HPE is trying to do is trying to allow you to step into that complexity by simplifying the solutions that we have.
Absolutely.
And
you don't think about it too much. Yeah, no line items for SQL or this and that. Or it's like, okay, I got the license, I can do the workload, and I get all the features that I can benefit from here in this ecosystem. So.
So for whatever the solution is that you need, whatever it is that you're trying to manage and protect and have visibility into, HPE and Veeam together want to be able to offer that to you in the way that you need to consume it, in a flexible way, in a simple way. And that kind of comes down to this next piece that I wanted to make sure that we hit on here before we end. And that's this concept of all these different pieces of infrastructure, right? We got Veeam and HPE and the software that's above that, all on the top. We've got hardware and infrastructure that's lying in between, and that could be all these different pieces: primary storage, backup targets, backup copies, archives, compute nodes, for VM replications, tape libraries for archive, cloud for archive. There's all these different pieces of that lie in between. But underneath all of that, HPE is offering whatever custom solution you need as a service for you. Yes, there's always going to be, cookie cutter and custom size and t-shirt sizes of solutions that are going to make things easy. But the truth is, everybody's environment is a little bit different. And we recognize that. So we do offer all of this as a service through HPE GreenLake. This includes your Veeam licensing as well as all the infrastructure that goes along with that. Now, not only is it infrastructure and software as a service, it can also be fully managed for you at whatever level that you want. In fact, I'm going to pop past this next slide. So the concept here, right, is that over time, what's going to happen is your backups are going to grow. Your data size is going to grow. Your data lake is going to grow. Your repositories are going to grow. And what do we usually do? We usually buy, 3 to 5 years in advance, right? So what do? We overbuy. We're buying buffer. That's our insurance policy, right, to make sure that we stay up and running. Used to do it all the time when I worked in IT because that was kind of the only way I could do it. The only mitigating way was maybe I could buy it on a lease, right? And now I can pay for it over time or something like that. But financing was really the only way to approach on-prem or co-load infrastructure solutions. GreenLake allows you to basically shift off of that concept anymore and truly have a self-service, pay-for-use, scale up, scale down, always have a buffer on-prem or in your colo, and allow you to have it managed even for you. So not only can you have the infrastructure as a service, you could actually have the solution as a service. You could have backup and DR as a service.
Yeah, I was going to say,
HP. That's right. And so this is kind of how it works.
And I think that's an important part is you could scale up. It's there. You're not ordering it and it's coming next week. You just scale up when you need to, right? That's built into this. Even though you're not paying for it, you can scale up and start utilizing just like cloud.
Yeah. In fact, there's a cool illustration here. So this is usually what our resource utilization looks like over time. And this can be actual data capacity. It could also be CPU and memory utilization, right? I mean, it's all resources within a data center. It can be licensing. That's another resource. Over time, what do? They continue to go up. Sometimes they'll drop down, but then they bump back up is usually what that looks like. Traditionally, what have we done? We go in, we deploy a solution in our rack. It's got servers, it's got software, it's got connectivity, and we overbuy, right? How much do we actually need? This part. How much do we buy? This much, right? There's our security policy. Or, and if we go as a pay-as-you-go, this is how GreenLake works. You need the green. We build in the buffer, but you don't pay for it. But you can burst into it whenever you need it, right? And then as you continue to grow, we continue to add buffer. And so that we are staying ahead of what your growth rates, we're managing that. It's all visible to us. And I'll show you how that works here in just a minute. So that we're deploying ahead of you and you are utilizing and paying for what you use over time. So what does that really look like? It means this is the reserve. This is your standard base, what you pay for every month. This is what your utilization is. And whatever you go over that reserve, you're just paying for. But this is what we've actually deployed and installed on premise. So, very, very straightforward. It's not unlike what hyperscalers do, but it allows us to take that model and apply it to something that's running in a colo or on-prem. Especially nice for those of you that don't have the ability because of security reasons or compliance reasons to move stuff into the cloud very well. Right. That you want to start consuming that way. Yeah, so there's over time, what ends up happening is as we see things grow or you predict something that's coming down the line, you work with HPE, we make a change request, we continue to add infrastructure or buffer. And like I said, that buffer could be additional licensing, it could be additional capacity, it could be more servers. The entire thing is encompassed in GreenLake within a portal. There's an analytics portal called GreenLake Central. This includes managed services up to whatever level you want. It can be just the infrastructure where we just manage deployment, patching, firmware, things like that. It could be software licensing as well as the hardware, the physical hardware that's there. So basically GreenLake will take over where it is that you want us to in your environment. And it can be a particular silo. If we're doing backup as a service with Veeam, we can back up your VMware environment. But if you want to do a different solution in a different environment, like your Splunk environment, then in those cases, you can do something separate there. So it's not all or nothing. It really can be customized based upon what you need. And ultimately, the way that you consume this, we're trying to simplify this the same way that Veeam is, trying to give you a single pane of glass to see everything, simplify licensing. With HPE GreenLake, you've got GreenLake Central, which is a single dashboard where you can go and see what your utilization is. You can even pull in information from your other clouds. If you're running stuff in Azure, you can pull that stuff in and you can compare your utilization. It will do an analysis and help you figure out where's the best place to run particular workloads. Where should you put your data? And with that visibility, teamed with what you're seeing out of your data management in Veeam, right? Now you have the ability to actually act on all of that information and put it where it needs, and order up the infrastructure that you need, and then just consume it as you need it, pay for it as you use it.
So make that complexity easy to manage, make it easy to consume, and predict costs. So yeah, that's fantastic.
So I know that that's pretty much what we had. Are there some additional questions that we should jump into? We're going to share some resources that have some more information about the stuff we've talked about with you, including that ESG survey that we talked about and some white papers about the integration points with Veeam and HPE. But are there any outstanding questions, Zane, we should look at?
And just so you know, Jonathan and Zane, we did share the full presentation with that resources slide to Jonathan's point. It's under handouts. So as an attendee, you should be able to click into your handouts and download that. And this resources slide is the last slide in there.
And,
second to
and then obviously,
so thank you.
Reach out to your HPE and Veeam teams to get even deeper into these. We covered, it's a lot of areas. There's a lot of things Veeam and HPE do together. We do have a few, on the GreenLake topic, is there, I think you covered it. There's about how do hardware refreshes work. I think you sort of covered that if you want to do more, but really how small can a Veeam solution be to use GreenLake backup as a service? That's one. I don't know if there is an answer to that or if it matters, but maybe
it doesn't really matter. The answer is what works best for you. It's true that it may not make sense at some particular scales. GreenLake might not be the best fit for what it is you're trying to do, but it depends what your drivers are. Is it around cost? Is it around flexibility? What is it you're trying to do? I didn't add in there, but actually co-location services can also be included in GreenLake. So if you're trying to do DR as a service with Veeam, but you don't want to invest in colo in the infrastructure there, you can literally still have colo. Yeah, and you can do it all through GreenLake.
So you're getting backup as a service without having to go to, that's awesome. The public cloud, right? That you still have some control over that data center. Or maybe compliance you brought up earlier, right? You can ensure that compliance is met, but you can consume it as a service. That's pretty great.
Yeah, and that kind of leads to, there is the question, well, how does a hardware refresh? When you consume through GreenLake, you don't own the infrastructure. HPE owns it. So actually, the onus is on us, right, to keep it up and running, to make sure that the buffer is there, to meet our SLAs. So as new technologies come out and new capabilities come out, that will just be part of the regular GreenLake process, is that stuff we'll either refresh it on our own or through a change request. If there's some type of new feature or capability you need, we then build that into your GreenLake contract and we add it to what you have. So actually the idea of
service.
Yeah, you don't have to manage lifecycle. There's no lifecycle management on your infrastructure anymore. When you're just like when you're buying it from Azure or AWS, you don't have to worry about lifecycle management on the infrastructure. That's their problem. In this case, it's HPE's problem.
It's amazing, but it's in your data center or your colo. It's the data center of the future, giving you that flexibility, the hyperscaler on-prem, or in your environment, or
I think the tagline, the marketing line they use is, it's the cloud that comes to you. It's a little bit cheesy, but that's the concept, right?
I like it.
And so I think there's some beauty in that, right? Because if you had a fully, hyperscaler cloud-based backup solution, you're running over your internet all the time. But now you can backup as a service. Infrastructure is running next to your production environment, right? Yeah. So performance becomes better, network utilization becomes better, and yet you can have all the benefits of as a service, right?
Of a service. Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, and really happy Veeam's part of it. And again, you can do this whole solution we talked about on that easy to use and consume platform. So, or even a piece of it, as you mentioned. So that's even great. Just my DR is this right now, and it works for me. I'll keep my traditional data center the way it is, at least for now. Yeah, I know we've gone long. I think that's all we have here. Unless there's anything else out there anybody wants to add. I definitely thank everybody for joining us today, and especially Jonathan. It's always great to talk with you in these discussions we have. This isn't the first one where we go into these deep concepts, so I always enjoy it.
Yep. Always a good time to hang with you, Zane.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you both for presenting today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Take care, everybody.
All right. Everyone have a great day. Bye.